Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. It is May the 19th, day 140. And we're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 19. The kind of a synopsis here of what has happened, because we talked about the beginning of this story, so Absolum has rebelled against his dad. David has left the city. There comes a conflict, and one of David's leaders, Joab, kills his son Absolum. So that's where we're picking up the story. Joab has killed Absolum. And it says, word soon reached Joab that the king was weeping and mourning for Absolum. As all the people heard of the king's deep grief for his son, the joy of that day's victory was turned into deep sadness. They crept back into the town that day as though they were ashamed and deserted in battle. The king covered his face with his hands and kept on crying, "Oh, my son Absalom, oh, Absalom, my son, my son." Then Joab went to the king's room and said to him, "We saved your life today and the lives of your sons, your daughters, and your wives and concubines. Yet you act like this, making us feel ashamed of ourselves. You seem to love those who hate you and hate those who love you. You have made it clear today that your commanders and troops mean nothing to you. It seems that if Absalom had lived and all of us had died, you would be pleased." So there's a couple of things that I think we could jump into here. Obviously, David's preference for his kids is, if you've listened to many of these podcasts or heard the sermon, you've heard my at least view that David, when it came to it, he could kill anybody else. I mean, they came and told him Saul died, and he's like, stick a spear in me, cut your head off. But when it came to dealing with his family, Amnon, Saul, Absalom, it just was really difficult. He just couldn't bring himself to do it. And so that kind of shapes my talk, my view of the story here. But it says that as the people heard of the deep grief of the son, they were excited because their king was back, David was back, he was in charge, the man who had tried to dethrone him was gone. They were filled with joy. But as they heard how sad David was, how much grief he was, the victory was turned into deep sadness. So what makes joy or victorious moments so quickly turn to sadness? What kind of things can be a hinge to do that?
I think in this situation, it is, like, we might say it's bittersweet, because yes, he has the kingdom back and everyone can have joy about that. But then also, yes, the son of the king had to die. But it had to be that way. It's just what had to happen in order for King David to be back. And so I feel like there are moments in our lives where we might experience great victory, but it might be bittersweet. Something had to be lost in order to gain that thing.
Yeah, well, it probably didn't have to happen. There could have been a reconciliation. Absalom could have said, I'm wrong, I'm taking the wrong path here. Mm-hmm. They could have reconciled. But since that didn't seem to be possible, this seems to be the only path. Mm-hmm. Jay, what kind of thing?
I think typically, obviously, from a victory, the troops would have come back. Everybody been rejoicing, high-fiving, and all worked up. But when they encountered David in his grief, it just kind of put like a wet blanket on the situation. It'd be kind of like you running into your house to share this great news with everybody's in there, and somebody in there just broke about something. You just like, oh, okay, just.
Yeah, so I could give you. It's hard to measure those emotions. That's what I would say. So I give you an example that I think has happened over the last couple of years. The pandemic has been devastating for some people. Some people have died. Some people have lost careers. Some people's health has been damaged, so they won't ever function again. In that same 2-year period, though, there have been some people who have flourished. I mean, they've started new businesses. They've made more money than they've ever made. They've gotten raises, new jobs, new careers. They've started a new business. I mean, you can look at some people, and in the last 2 years, they flourished. And, even here at our church, so we have seen significant financial growth in the last 2 years, and attendance was significantly down. We were out of the building for 3 entire months, but giving's gone up 2 years in a row. And then I see other churches that have closed, never to come back again. And so there's a tension present. Like, I can't not be happy, but I also have to recognize there are other people who have had a different experience than me.
Yeah, I think it also bears in mind how much influence we have on other people with our emotions, whatever they are. We're happy, excited, sad, crying, whatever the case may be, that it impacts and influences other people, whether we intend for it to or not. It just does. And so, in David's situation, I don't think anybody's going to judge him for being sad about the loss of his son. But at the same time, this creeps into a lot of areas and affects a lot of people.
Yeah, because apparently he doesn't even acknowledge that Joab has saved his entire household. He doesn't even. They feel like, okay, we've got to crawl back into town, ashamed that we have won a victory. And in verse 6, it says, "You seem to love those who hate you and hate those who love you. You made it clear today that your commanders and troops mean nothing to you. It seems that if Absalom had lived and all of us had died, you would be pleased." So David's grieving, but Joab's not taking it. He's not taking it that you're just grieving.
Yeah.
He's taking it that you don't even care about us at all, like what we've done for you. Do we at times love the wrong people? And why?
I think there's probably a song about that somewhere in it.
A song, probably a lot of country songs. I can imagine.
I'm sure. Perhaps we do love, quote, the wrong people sometimes. Perhaps we love the right people at the wrong time sometimes, or too much. Because if you back this story up a little bit, anybody else that would have come against David and his kingship and his kingdom, he would have went to battle and just slaughtered them and just put everything in order. But because it was Absalom, his son, he just kind of turned and run from him. And it makes you wonder. Love sometimes can cause us, I think, to make improper choices and decisions, though.
When it says love is blind, I do believe love blinds us at times. It causes us not to be able to see things.
Yeah, and I think this whole story is one of those instances where we can clearly see that his love for his son caused him to make some very poor choices or refuse to make the right choices at the right time.
I think even with love, like we're obviously called to love our neighbor as ourselves, to love everyone. So we can't say, oh, well, we love the wrong person. But I think like in love, there are different levels of love. And I think sometimes too, we make sacrifices for some people, and you may be making sacrifices for somebody. Like David might have wanted to make sacrifices for his son and that he didn't want his son to suffer. But by making those sacrifices, he ends up hurting himself or hurting his own kingdom, or hurting his own household. And so I think there are times when we have such an attachment to somebody or we love them so much that we make sacrifices or we make changes to our own lives that we don't realize are detrimental to ourselves, the people around us. In love, we think it's love, but when in actuality, it's not that we're just loving this person, but we're hurting the ones around us. That can be dangerous.
Yeah, sometimes loving, if you're called to love people, you have to be careful that you don't hurt 99 because you're trying to, fix one. And so Jesus left the 99 to save the one, but
also with the sheep analogy, he left them in a pen. I don't think he left them.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't think they were going on.
He's going to continue to have one. He went from having one loss to 10 loss. Now, now he's got a bigger problem. Right? So I would see this. the most common place, I'm going to give you the most common place I've seen this in church, so is when pastors overemphasize people with influence and money. When they spend an inordinate amount of time with people of high influence or high giving capacity. Doesn't mean you shouldn't, okay? But when that's the only person that gets your attention, and you discard people who can't do the same thing for you, sometimes you love the wrong person. You're loving the wrong person when you need to be helping the others. You know, I remember a few years back, we had a missionary visiting with us, and he stayed with a family that had a large house on the water, and he got in the car. We were driving to Atlanta for a conference after that, and as we were riding along, he said, "Can I ask you a question?" He said, "You know," he was talking about the house where he had stayed, and he said, "How do you deal with people that have money?" I said, "The same way I deal with people who don't. Like, it's not going to move my needle. You know, if as far as friendship goes, if we connect or we don't connect, the money's irrelevant. But like, I don't have a donor list that I check off. You know, I'm not going to not say what I need to say because somebody in the room might stop giving. I just can't do that."
Yeah, we see the downside of that a lot of times in politics. You know, there's a lot of influence with people with money and favor, and it seems like it makes it difficult sometimes for politicians to make the right or the difficult decisions because they don't want to offend a particular person or group of people. And therefore, you could call it love or loyalty toward that sometimes comes at the expense of the good of everybody else.
Yeah, and so Joab clearly has a pretty good relationship with David, and he's pretty ticked off for him to talk to the king this way, because verse 7, he says, "Now go out there and congratulate your troops." I mean, like, that's pretty strong language you use to the king. "For I swear by the Lord that if you don't go out, not a single one of them will remain here tonight, then you will be worse off than you were before." Like, you're going to die because, you know, if you think things were bad, they're going to get worse. If we abandon you, you're going to be out of luck. What do we owe to people that stick with us in our most difficult times?
The same thing that we see here, I think sometimes just a simple acknowledgement, you know, that you recognize they've been in the trenches, they fought the good fight, even if it's come at a great expense, whether that be physically, mentally, emotionally, or whatever it is. But on occasions, people that are loyal to you need to hear that from you, even in the midst of difficult circumstances.
Yeah, like you were saying, in his worst, they stuck by him. And when people are loyal to us when we're at our worst, then we can trust them to be loyal to us, that they'll be with us when things are good too. And so when they're at their worst, we should do the same, obviously, you know, because that takes a lot to be there for someone when they're really when they're really out, down and out.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can think about the worst moments in my life, and I can count on one hand, just a couple fingers, you know, the people that I know were there the entire time, never budged. And I'm eternally grateful and indebted, you know, like, I would do whatever they ask, pretty much. I mean, short of sinning, you know.
Good.
To help them in any time of need. And I think we are obligated to people. We shouldn't have reciprocal relationships where we feel like, you know, I'm going to do something so you'll do something back. But people who stick with us in the worst of times are so unusual that you better keep those people around.
Yeah.
Verse 9 and 10, it says, "And throughout all the tribes of Israel, there was so much discussion and argument going on. The people were saying, 'The king rescued us from our enemies and saved us from the Philistines, but Absalom chased him out of the country. Now Absalom, whom we anointed to rule over us, is dead. Why not ask David to come back and be our king again?'" This isn't a long period of time. But people are so wishy-washy. I mean, like, when I read this, I think, gosh, people are so...
Yeah.
They will abandon you in a heartbeat.
Yep.
What makes people so wishy-washy? Why can they not be committed?
I think often the motivation is what they perceive is best for them, their best interest. And they're willing to move and attach themselves and change their team colors for whatever is in their best interest, or at least what they perceive to be at the time.
I think most people are just selfish, Most things in life, it's just we think about ourselves first. What can I get out of this? Or even just my family. What can my family get out of this? And some people might say that's selfless to think of your family, but you're still thinking about yourself, And so I find that even many religions are very much self-focused of like, oh, well, this is going to get me that, or if I do this, that'll lead to that. And ultimately, what God calls us to is to think of others. And when we are selfish, we are only thinking of ourselves, we are wishy-washy because we're always trying to find the best thing for ourselves and not necessarily think of the big picture.
Yeah, I prefer to know what to expect. We've talked in here before. I'd rather have a devil I know than one I don't. I prefer a little bit more consistency. And when people, I know some people, like I know them really, really personally. That day to day, you never know what you're going. I shouldn't even say day to day.
I'm gonna say some.
Second to second, I've sat in
moment
rooms
to
with
moment.
people, and somebody on this side of the table said something. They go, "You know what? I was thinking the exact thing, same thing." And then somebody on the other side of the table says the complete opposite thing, and they said, "You know what? I was thinking the exact same thing." Well, which one were you thinking?
You can't be both.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm always amazed that sometimes I think we have such a desire to be liked, accepted, approved, that we're going to say or do or act or follow whoever is the one, that happens to be up front. Verses 11 through 13 says, Then King David sent Zadok and Abiathar the priests to say to the elders of Judah, "Why are you the last ones to welcome back the king into this place? For I have heard that all of Israel is ready. You are my relatives, my own tribe, my own flesh and blood. So why are you the last ones to welcome back the king?" And David told them to tell Amasa, "Since you are my own flesh and blood like Joab, may God strike me or even kill me if I do not appoint you as commander of my army in his place." Family apparently is the last one to come around. Why? Why would that be? Why are family members the most difficult to move on?
Well, they know us I say the best in the sense of most of the time they've known us the longest, at least. And I think sometimes there's a built-in resentment or jealousy within family. If somebody has done well, in this instance, David, there's a reluctance to want to support again. I think it was Jesus himself said, "A prophet's not without honor except in his own country among his own people." It's difficult among folks that you're close to, that including family, to do anything sometimes.
Yeah, I think family have to love us,
Even if they don't like to.
Even if they don't like to. Whereas other people, they get to choose if they love us, and so that the kind of love is different. Or even like the way they like you is different. And so sometimes there may be times when you will find support from people outside of your family before you find the support of your family, simply because they are choosing that they want to be there for you. Whereas your family, it's almost like an obligation. It can be that way sometimes. I hope families support each other. I would hope that would be the case.
Yeah, so some of how I read this is, I think in this story, it's clear David has lost a lot of respect with the people closest to him. They don't appreciate the stunt that he's pulled by abandoning them and leaving them there with Absolum. They don't appreciate the fact that Joab clearly is ticked off that he didn't appreciate the troops that won him the victory. And I think the people closest to us are the ones we disappoint the most. And are hardest to come around. People who, look, the people who are in the cities, who were miles away, who weren't directly affected by it, sure, okay, whoever's king, as long as they don't mess with my life. people in the palace, the people of her family, the people who were close to, they had the most to lose. And I think he's lost a lot of respect here. That's
No doubt.
kind of how I view it. So, well, good. Zach, you want to close us up in prayer today?
Yeah, sure. God, we just thank you for this time that we have together. Lord, we just thank you that we get to dive into your word each day. God, I just pray that as we continue to dive into your word, I just pray, Lord, that you would help us grow closer to you. I pray that you would help us to ask deeper questions to one another, that we would be able to grow closer to one another and grow closer to you. So we thank you, God. Praise all in Jesus' name. Amen.